So unlike certain investors, you're all investors, you have a much broader agenda, which is to ignite local jobs and entrepreneurship. So to start, why don't you share with the audience what your mission is in your respective cities? Charlie, why don't we start
Okay,
with you?
we're actually a state organization. So Launch Tennessee was set up a couple of years ago to really help drive entrepreneurship and innovation across the state. So we've got 4 kind of verticals, if you will, that we focus on every day. One is entrepreneurship, 2 is capital formation, commercialization 3, and then outreach 4. So we consider ourselves the marketing arm for entrepreneurship around the state. So we've got a variety of different strategies that we're doing across each of those verticals. One thing that's really interesting that's fairly unique across the country is we've set up a statewide network of accelerators. Obviously, there's a lot of accelerators around the country now, but in terms of having a connected network across the state, Tennessee is one of the few states doing that. So that's been a great initiative for us in terms of giving us place and really a distribution network for activities, for mentors, for entrepreneurs and investors.
I think you said one of the few. I think you're one of the only that I know of. So that's nine cities in the state working together.
Yes. Yep. And we have it's a mix of, as you would imagine, urban accelerators, say in Nashville or in Chattanooga, and then more rural as well. So they each come with their own sets of opportunities and challenges, and we're trying to address them uniquely is see where we can help.
And how much is the state funding?
It was set up as a 3-year kind of program to kickstart activity. The state kicks in $250,000 per year to each of the 9, and then they're responsible for coming up with matching dollars from local supporters. We're actually, that 3-year contract will expire at the end of this year. We're changing the formula a little bit as we move into 215 to be more of a tiered structure. Some will be base pay, if you will, and then some incentive for graduating more high-growth companies through their network.
Okay. And Ginger, what are you doing in St. Louis?
So the organization that I represent, Arch Grants, is a nonprofit funding for-profit companies willing to headquarter in St. Louis. And the strategy that we employ to do that is we have an annual startup competition. And we open that process, that request for proposals in the fall. It closes early the following year. And then 2 weekends ago, we hosted our 3rd annual global startup competition. We'll announce our winners in May, and thus far Arch Grants has put about $2 million into 35 companies that have gone on to create 190 jobs, generate $6.5 million in revenue, and they've attracted almost $18 million in follow-on capital. So the premise of Arch Grants was in St. Louis, we've had a tough national narrative. And for those of you from Oakland, I think we can empathize with each other. So how do we change that national narrative? Ours was about crystal meth. It was about high crime. It was about really frightening stories that are not representative of the whole. And so how could we change the national narrative about St. Louis? And the founding members of Arch Grants really saw investment in local talent. So how do we retain the talent we graduate every year, because St. Louis is also a college town? But how do we also intentionally and strategically incentivize the talent we need to grow our ecosystem? So St. Louis has this emerging tech startup infrastructure that's really on the precipice of tremendous growth. What could we as an agency do to ensure that we're strategically attracting talent to really take the ecosystem to the next level? And bring in companies that we know can be successful in our market, given that each market has a unique sort of paradigm. And so we've had tremendous success in recruiting companies that see St. Louis as a place where they can not only do business, but grow their business. And we use $50,000 non-equity, so this is free money, grants to incentivize the folks to move into our market and to retain the talent that we're graduating each year. So when I talk about this $2 million investment, that's been in the form of non-equity grants in these companies. And then one of my roles, along with our board, is to really ensure that we network the entrepreneurs into our market and to the startup ecosystem so that they are with their peers in this space too.
Okay. Now, Chris, yours is a little different. It's not with working with the city, but you are working the city, but you're working in a what you're doing is fascinating, and I can't even explain it. So you're gonna have to do with that.
So we are working with the California Department of Corrections in Sacramento. So we're looking at how do we really effectively take a private effort and work effectively with government agency. It does have a lot of impact, and I'll explain what we're doing, but it does have a lot of impact in the East Bay, certainly in Alameda County, because that's where many of the men that we're working with will parole to. So there is definitely an impact to this area. What I'm talking about is a program that we started initially in San Quentin Prison, and we really formulated a business incubator inside incarcerated setting. And initially it sounded like a bit of a crazy idea, but we are venture investors in Silicon Valley, and I was really presented the opportunity and went in for the first time about 5 years ago into San Quentin, and really had a very different perception of what I left with. And that perception was that people inside really had no talent, no hope, no ability to do anything. And when I left, after doing a presentation there and really interacting with some of the guys, I realized there was a lot of interest to better themselves and prepare themselves after they served their time. So we created a program. We're in our 4th year. We're now in LA County. We're expanding to different state prisons. And the premise really is to teach entrepreneurship, to teach business skills, and now we're iterating the program to include coding, and our first curriculum will include a JavaScript program there. We'll be the first one in the country. And you know, the problem is massive. We talk a lot about, you know, certainly here, dealing with massive problems and big sort of market opportunities. Well, this is a massive problem in the U.S. You know, the amount we spend in incarcerated settings is about $100 billion. There are 2.3 million people incarcerated in America. It's about 25% of the total incarcerated population of the world. So it's a big, big problem, and we really feel like we can make an impact because on the flip side of that, the recidivism rate in the U.S. is over 60% within 3 years. So many of the guys that are inside, I say guys, men and women, come back. And that's just, from an investor point of view, it's not a very good ROI. So we're making some great impact, and we're a nonprofit now as of November of last year. And I think we'll make an impact on the community because the people that come back after they get out will be positive and will be taxpayers as opposed to trying to reoffend.
Now, Chris, you mentioned ROI. So what % of your mission is measured on financial returns versus jobs created?
Well, the biggest metric so far in the penal system is recidivism. So, do I reoffend? Do I become, you know, another cost again to the society? And so we've actually created something called the Impact Index, and basically it's tracking those that graduate. Not only do they not reoffend, but that they're employed, they're paying taxes, they're really devoting time to their community, they have a solid family structure, they're going back and getting another degree. So we're looking over the next 5 years at creating a whole new metric that we can take back to the CDCR and say recidivism is only one component of that. It's a trailing effect that has large impact on community.
Okay, and what I know you're relatively new, but what's that index now? What's I guess how many employed?
Yeah. So we have 35 graduates. 7 are actually employed in San Francisco in tech startups, and that number is going to grow pretty dramatically because in LA County, the release rate is much higher because with realignment, people are getting out within a year to 18 months. In San Quentin, it's primarily, and so we don't really know when they're getting out necessarily. So we believe that the numbers are going to increase dramatically over the next 5 years.
Charlie, your focus really is in Chattanooga, so you can talk about specifically that city or the state of Tennessee, but I'm assuming you're focusing a lot on financial returns as well as jobs created?
Yes, it's both. And so our organization is based in Nashville. We're a statewide organization. Prior to coming into this role a year and a half ago, I'm from Chattanooga, and I was running the Accelerator in Chattanooga that we'd started about 2.5 years ago, and also had an angel fund there. So I'm more familiar with, Chattanooga just for over my involvement in the last 4 or 5 years, but really across the state. So a couple things. We have a co-investment fund that we run at Launch Tennessee that's a $30 million fund. So, and the idea is it's an evergreen fund, and so we certainly are looking at financial returns there. And it is a co-investment fund, so it's got to be Tennessee-based companies. And we can, if we have investors who have over $15 million under management, whether they're state-based investors or outside the state, if they're leading the deal, we'll match basically 20% on that deal. And then those investors also get 25% of our carried interest.
The city or the state matches? Sorry.
That's a state fund.
Okay, so the state matches.
Yeah, and actually it's part of a federal fund that was put in place a few years ago, the SSBCI, the State Small Business Credit Initiative, so national program, about $1.5 billion. Some states did loan programs. Actually, most of the states did. We've decided to put ours in a co-investment fund that Launch Tennessee runs. So over the last year and a half, we've actually invested $20 million that's leveraged $57 million in private capital across 32 Tennessee-based companies. So certainly we're hopeful of financial returns and positive liquidity events there so we can have more money to invest in more companies. But we also, under the Accelerator network, it's more about, there's a few different things. We're pushing our accelerators to do two things. To, number one, get more high-growth companies through into their doors, mentored, introduced to investors, and then on their way. So we're very much measuring jobs there. We're also measuring capital raised. So over the last 2 years since we started the program, we've had about 150 graduates through our 9 accelerators. They've actually raised $47 million in capital.
47 million?
47, yeah. And so those are kind of the key metrics there. But we also push the accelerators to be the front door for entrepreneurship in their region. So in that, we want any entrepreneur to be able to come in and get a meeting with somebody on staff. It doesn't mean the accelerator has to have a program or service for them, but they're the intake organization. And whether they can serve them or refer them to somebody else, the chamber, the SB, Small Business Development Center, whatever the case may be. So in that case, we're measuring, it's more that front end of the pipeline, if you will. So we measure screenings. So we had over 1,500 of these, 1-hour screenings last year. We also are measuring events. So we had over 600
screening?
events. Screening, that's the intake meeting. That's an hour-long meeting where the staff member will meet with an entrepreneur to hear their idea and then see if they're going to fit in the accelerator program or if there's somewhere else that they ought to be referred to. So again, in that case, we're measuring activity, screenings, and then events to be that front door in their region, and also engagement within the community. So mentors, how many mentors do they have in their network, and how engaged are they? Different types of mentors. So we've got a few different metrics.
That's a big spreadsheet of metrics to follow, but that's good. So Ginger, you talked about your success metrics, 190 jobs, $18 million in follow-on capital. So talk about some of the challenges. I'm sure it's whether, I believe you said that the startups have to stay in St. Louis for a year.
They have to
so
stay
whether it's attracting them there or maybe working with your local government, what are some of the challenges?
Well, I think one of our challenges is, given that it's free money and we don't take an equity stake, it's the sustainability of our own program. So we have the benefit in the state of the Missouri Technology Corporation, which is a similar initiative to Launch Tennessee. So they maintain accelerators. They're funded through a state appropriation. There is a small amount of money relative to their total coffers, but to us, it's a significant investment in Arch grants through MTC, and that grant covers operating expenses only. So that's a restricted gift that enables me to be paid and one other staff member to be paid. And then the rest of the expenses that we have in our budget are essentially program expenses. It's all going toward the grants to the entrepreneurs.
Are these city grants, or they're
largely
grants?
Corporations, foundations, and individuals. So being a nonprofit, it really reflects sort of that standard mix of the 3 pools of income.
But the difference with Arch Grants, because of what we do in the business community, is that we have a much higher percentage of investment from corporations than a traditional nonprofit might. Most nonprofits have 80 to 90% of their income is traditionally coming from individuals. We don't have that right now. We have about 60% of our income in terms of philanthropic investment is coming from corporate entities in the community. And that's very important because they see Arch Grants as a means to an end in their own business too. We're increasing the potential loan pool, we're increasing the potential occupancy folks in terms of all the commercial real estate downtown. So the corporate investors that we have, they certainly are investing in Arch Grants because they love St. Louis, but they're also investing in Arch Grants because they see our companies as potential clients down the road. And many of our corporate investors are also providing pro bono services to the Arch Grants grant recipients. So they receive not only a $50,000 initial grant from us, but then they receive a host of wraparound services to help them get their company launched. Or in some cases, they've already launched, but they need additional help because now they're getting into IP issues and you know, growing their business or growing their staff. So we offer all that. Managing all of that with a staff of 2, that's a challenge. Managing a board that's very opinionated because they've been invested in this since the very beginning is a wonderful challenge to have. Engagement is a gift, but how to manage through everybody's agendas can be a little challenging. And I think when we look at the retention of our companies, we're a startup funding startups. This is our 3rd year. 10 years, how many of the companies that we funded are still in St. Louis? I can't predict it, but when we see that metric, that's going to be a really important metric. And so Bambi managing that so they're still there in 10 years, that's a challenge.
Right. But at least you've you know, you've created the opportunity, and that's.
We've created the opportunity.
You can't keep them there. You got to let them go.
And and that's success too, right? We've had one that was acquired. Hooray! That's not a bad story to tell. And we've had 2 that have closed. Those are still success stories because the entrepreneurs have stayed in St. Louis and are starting new businesses. So
you bring up a great point, Ginger, because sometimes we won't be able to always measure success, but we can actually see how the culture is changing and how much mentors you're providing and time and engagement you're talking about. So I want all 3 of you to talk about this, but how is the culture changing now that you've introduced sort of this entrepreneurial mindset? How has that changed everybody? Chris, let's start with you, because you know, showing these men and women that you know, that they can really be self-directed and take charge, and how has it changed there?
It's changed a lot. You know, when we first started the program in San Quentin, I think there was some hesitancy and some question about what the program was. Should I get involved? Do I trust these people? You know, trust in prison is not necessarily that natural. But certainly over time, they saw guys getting out, guys getting jobs. There's been a lot of media coverage around it, so they see their brothers out there on TV. That has a lot of impact. And certainly we've seen a tremendous amount of interest, not only in the prisons that we're in, but also we get emails literally every day from correctional facilities, from people who are inquiring about a program for their loved one who's incarcerated. But the most dramatic thing was that, you know, I got a comment from the warden at San Quentin basically saying that we feel like the dynamics within the yard is changing, that there is this sense of hope, and a lot of the men really feel like if they work toward a educational path to be considered for a program, that's had a huge impact. So you can talk about all the metrics. This is a very sort of unquantifiable one, but just the feeling, the violence reduced in prison, the sense of going on the right track for education. Those things we didn't think about when we first started it, but it's been a huge impact.
Hold that thought, guys. Just on a programming note, we're going to continue with the startup competition right after this. So this way we will save some time. So, okay, so Ginger.
I think for us, and I agree, some of the metrics are squishy. So one of my favorite squishy metrics is, I call it the happiness factor. And our entrepreneurs in St. Louis have become evangelists for St. Louis. And that is a nice surprise.
Ambassadors?
Yep, they really have. And one of the best examples was a blog. It was a need-want blog, why I moved my startup from San Francisco to St. Louis. And when that hit and got picked up nationally, that was huge. And then Forbes inquired, and then Entrepreneur Magazine acquired. We've had some lovely shout-outs from our entrepreneurs that have been completely independently initiated by them. And so that, to me, is telling me that the value added that they see being in the St. Louis market, affiliated with Arch Grants, affiliated with the broader startup ecosystem there, it's getting traction. And again, it's in this wonderful space where it's just primed for tremendous growth.
That's great. One barometer that I'll reference in Tennessee, 3.5 years ago when I was in Chattanooga, and I was starting this angel fund, Chattanooga Renaissance Fund, and talking to folks, and it's hard to believe, but there was really one organized angel group in Tennessee at that time, and Chattanooga had never had one. So it was pulling teeth to get people into that and try to educate them on what angel investing was all about, and try to get their head wrapped around the fact that 60 to 70% of these companies were not going to return any money. 30 to 40% would probably be out of business in 3 or 4 years. And so we did raise $3 million and have had some success with that, have actually fully invested it now, and Chattanooga Renaissance Fund 2 just closed at the end of April with $8.5 million. But on a statewide level, what's really cool now, over the last 6 months, we've had 9 different angel funds that have closed their fund or getting ready to close within the next 60 days by the end of June, representing about $40 million. And this was from 3.5 years ago where we had one $5 million fund. So I think people are getting energized about the opportunities. People are seeing that with the Accelerator network, we're getting more quality companies. Our pipeline is full, and we're getting better output, and so there's a gap. We need to have capital there to support these companies when they graduate from our programs. So they're seeing opportunity there from an investment standpoint. And the other thing that's been huge for us, we started a conference last year called Southland, and really I'm a big believer in collaboration across the state and across the region. So we actually were trying to draw in investors from the coast to come to Tennessee, and we made it about best of the Southeast, so companies from all over the Southeast could apply. And that's been great, again, for the region as well. Where we still need to get to, Bambi, and where I think you are in California, is that celebration of failure. And I know it's hard to think celebrate failure, but we talked about that, Ginger, a couple of your companies. And how do we, and I think you have it in spades out here, rewarding people and appreciating entrepreneurs for getting up on that horse and riding. And even if they fall off, say, they're still rock stars. I want to hear what you're doing next time. And I want to support you because of the lessons learned. That's where we're trying to get to in Tennessee.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of those lessons on our website. So does anyone here have any questions for the panelists? Oh, we have a couple of questions back there. And then are our judges here for the competition? Raise your hand if the judges are here for the competition. I see 1, I see 2, I feel like, what do you call those guys?
Auctioneer.
Yeah, auctioneer.
Yeah.
And then anyone who wants to be a judge. No, I'm kidding. Are the finalists here? Okay, I see them. Okay, let's ask that question, Philly.
I always feel like I'm a
Okay, thanks. My question is for Chris. For the last mile, I was just wondering who's hiring graduates or participants of that program, and what have your conversations with the folks doing the hiring been like?
It's a great question.
Yeah, so what we ask companies to do is start out with an internship program. It's basically a 4-month internship. There's no obligation to hire after they complete the internship, but that frankly is the most critical time post-release, those 4 months, to sort of reintegrate into not only society, business, but work. We've had several guys that have gone on to full-time employment with those companies. And the comment that we get back is that they walk in with such strong work ethic and positive attitude that it's really been a positive experience for everyone in the companies. So now, as we have guys getting out, we have companies that are ready to step up to do more internships. And as I mentioned, we're starting the coding curriculum, and we'll plan to graduate both men and women, because we're going to be starting a program at Folsom Women's Prison, and they will be qualified to be junior programmers and start to contribute right away that way. But the resistance, and mainly been startups that have participated in the program, but they've been really, really receptive, and the results have been really fantastic.
Okay, one more question right here. Margot? Wait for the mic, Margot.
Margot from the City of Oakland. I help grow business in Oakland, and I can see things relevant. Thank you, Bambi. These were excellent presentations and relate a lot to the Bay Area. There's a lot of equity issues. I think geographic equity, spreading tech beyond SFO and then Oakland is important. I wanted to ask about the role of government. I know that where we can secure financing, that helps. We might be able to get revolving loan funds, and help bring it out. But what's the other roles you see? Is it networking? Is it helping follow it, like a continuity for some people who are in sort of serial, get employed and then have to move on? But what are the real things that local government, can provide from your point of view?
Yeah, I'll give you a different, one perspective that we're trying to push. And again, this is Chattanooga. We've got a new mayor in there who's been in there for a year. And we're always pushing our Accelerator. Our company's coming through our Accelerator. It's about customer discovery, getting early customers, getting product in their hands, getting them using it, and iterate, and then go scale your company. The city of Chattanooga is actually coming in as a customer for a lot of the entrepreneurs in the city. So that's a role that a lot of times you don't see government playing, because people think, what do the grants look like? What kind of funds are you giving here and there? And we're doing that too, and a lot of that comes through our organization. But we're really trying to push our communities, our municipalities, to say you can be even more important to the startup community by being that early customer.
Yeah, I would agree. It's to be able to do business in that local community. How do they intentionally support the engagement, the collision effect that happens to allow for that type of sharing of resources and then ability to do contract work? But we also engage our chamber, so the regional chamber is involved in our work. The Economic Development Partnership, which is a unique entity between the city and state of St. Louis, city and county rather. And then statewide, the Secretary of State has been into the incubator in which we cohabitate. We're about capital, not about real estate, but we cohabitate with our companies in an accelerator. And so the Secretary of State has come into that space to really talk to the entrepreneurs, to just have them be present and pleasant as state officials and listen, so that they're having
and be customers.
Yes, present. Yes, we are customers, right? So to have that entity be present and pleasant and listen and engage and have it be intentional and open for discussion, and to share a business card. Who on the staff do I contact when I have a problem, so I am not in the abyss of your voicemail? That type of intentionality and customer service with government officials is huge.
Okay, the city as the customer. I will take that to the powers that be here and give them that advice. That's great. Thank you, guys.